Good morning, everyone. Thank you all so much for being here in person and on Salesforce Plus. I know it is bright and early for you all here in person, so thank you for grabbing your coffee and choosing to join me today to learn all about how to go with the speed of Iron Viz and get a little faster and more efficient in Tableau. My name is Lisa Trescott. I am a research analyst at Miracosta College, which is actually just right up the street here in Oceanside. And I'm also a Tableau Visionary and Tableau Ambassador. And back in 2021, I was the Iron Viz champion. Thank you. Thank you. So you might be thinking to yourself, 2021? Wasn't that a COVID year? Did we actually have a conference? And yes, we did. It was a COVID year. We were all still living like shut-ins, wiping down our groceries. But we did actually have a conference. It was just held virtually, which means that I didn't do Iron Viz on the main stage. I did it in my bedroom, which definitely had some pros and cons, right? I didn't have the roar of the crowd to distract me. I didn't have Andy in my ear. But there were definitely also some cons. I think the biggest one is I didn't do it on the main stage, right? It's kind of this rite of passage for Iron Viz contestants, I think, to be on that big stage. But you're never going to see a picture of me like this, right? Like triumphantly holding the Iron Viz trophy as confetti rains down upon me like Will and Paul here. But what you will find is this. I think it's just as good. This is a real tweet, by the way. The Information Lab tweeted this out. And I just wanted to thank you very much right now, whoever was running their social media that day, for finding me, mid-sneeze, winning Iron Viz, and then putting the confetti on. I think leaving the pause button on there, too, was just chef's kiss. But all kidding aside, you don't get to a moment like this without getting seriously faster in Tableau. And I think that was probably the biggest pro of being in Iron Viz. You only have 20 minutes to build something like this. This has 14 individual sheets, all with custom formatting and tooltips. There's a custom color palette. There's 3 different dashboard actions. There's pages interactivity. There's a Spotify playlist. There's so much going on. And with only 20 minutes, your workflow has to be really lean and mean. So going through Iron Viz, I learned a lot about getting faster. And I integrate those things now in my daily workflow. And that's exactly what I want to talk with you all about today, are the things that I took from that and things that I've learned throughout Tableau just to get faster and more efficient day to day. So I'm going to go through 5 main areas. I'm going to talk about how to format your workbooks, how to navigate the workspace efficiently, how to work with color, write calculated fields and parameters, and then ultimately put it all together and build a dashboard. So this is now going to be pretty much a Tableau demonstration, but I will be posting a dashboard to my Tableau public page after the conference. So it's going to recap all of the tips that you see today. Plus, you have access to this on Salesforce Plus after the conference. So you will be able to find all of this information again shortly after the conference. So like I said, I'm going to start off talking about workbook formatting. When you see Iron Viz tonight, I can all but guarantee you that the 3 contestants are going to do the same thing in the first minute or 2 of their build. And that's they're going to apply workbook level formatting. So what I mean by that is when you go up here to format in your toolbar, you have the option to format at the workbook level. And when you select that, you get this side panel over here to the left, where you can set fonts and lines for your whole workbook. So this is a universal application to all of your formatting. So you can select a font for the whole workbook. I usually just leave it in Tableau because that works everywhere. But you could select any font that you have on your computer. You can also override the all feature right at the worksheet level. I'm going to bring the font up because I want you all to be able to see what I'm doing. So I can change the font size, color, boldness. Same thing with worksheet titles. I'm going to bring those up in size so you can see them. And I'm going to make them bold. And I'm going to make them blue. And so you'll see that that's changing over here in this worksheet, and it's happening in all of the worksheets that I have in this workbook. You can also modify your lines within your workbook formatting. So I have a passionate hatred for grid lines. Thank you. I think they're disgusting. I don't know why. I really hate them. So the first thing I do in every single workbook is I turn them off. So you can do that over here in grid lines, just by clicking this little caret, and then there's this, it says automatic, you just flick that to off, and you will never have to see a grid line in this whole workbook. You can also click this little more icon here and open up all the different line types in Tableau and do the same thing. You can edit them. You have the option to turn most of them on and off like you did with grid lines. Right here I could turn my axis lines off. But some of them don't have that. I don't really know why. I don't know the rhyme or reason there. But if you don't have the ability to turn a line off and you want to, you can just turn the color opacity all the way to 0. That's going to have basically the same effect of turning the line off. So that's workbook level formatting. You get a lot of bang for your buck there. But you also probably want to format at the sheet level. So to do that, I usually just right-click in any white space and click Format. And again, you're going to get a whole side panel over here to the left. Whatever you do here will override whatever you do at the workbook level. So you can see it's coming in as that blue title that I set. I could change it to pink, and then this title would be pink, but none of my other sheets would be. You can also change your alignment. I usually like to left justify my headers. I think that's easier on an end user. So I can do that here at the sheet, and it will be on the sheet level. You can also change the shading of your sheet here. I usually make it none, right? I like a transparent sheet, but I want you all to be able to see things. You can't see a none color. So I'm going to make it gray just for this demonstration. And you can change row and column colors as well. You can also change row and column dividers. Again, I turn them off. If you haven't noticed, I like to turn a lot of stuff off. But again, you can't see that. So I'll make these really big and obnoxious and colorful just for this presentation so you can see what's going on. So here I have a very lovely formatted worksheet. Let's say I want all of my chart sheets to look like this. I want to format everything like this. You do not have to go through all of those clicks again. You don't have to set that formatting for every single sheet. If you look down here and right-click on a sheet, you have the option to copy the formatting. So you can click Copy Formatting, and then I'm going to open a new sheet. I like the keyboard shortcut Control-M. That will open up a new sheet right next to the one you're working on. And then you can right-click here and paste the formatting. And you can see I didn't have to redo all that formatting. I will also usually take a sheet like this, and I will rename it. I'll call it Dummy Format. This will be the sheet that I'm going to go back to time and time again to copy and paste from. I'll usually color code it by right-clicking and assigning a color. So when I'm 20 sheets into this workbook, I can quickly jump back, find that worksheet, copy it, and then paste it. You may also want to set formatting for your different fields, especially measures. So here I have a chart that shows sales by month, and I have sales on label. But sales is coming in as just a number, right? But sales is money. So I could go into the label on this worksheet and right-click here and format it. But then that formatting would only apply to the labels on this sheet. And I want sales to look like money all of the time. So instead of doing it there, you can right-click on your measure and go down to Default Properties. There are several different types of default properties you can adjust. I'm going to just talk about number formatting right now. But when you go in there, Tableau gives you this pop-up, and you have a lot of different options to customize your formatting for this pill, for this measure, for your whole workbook. So you can see there's currency. You could change the currency type. You could go in and modify it even more and customize it. I can take the decimals off. You can set what your negative values look like. You can add units. We'll add thousands. You can even add prefixes and suffixes. I'll just type TC here just to make another obvious formatting choice. We'll click OK, and you can see that that is formatted now here on this label. But if I were to create another sheet, just again by hitting Control-M and drag sales on, you see that exact same formatting. So it now applies to the whole workbook. And what I typically do is when I have fields that are going to be formatted the same way throughout the workbook, I will change that default formatting for multiple fields at the same time. So if I click sales and profit, right, because profit's also money, I can right-click, I hit Control to select both of those. I can right-click and select the number formatting for both of those, and then it'll be applied to both those pills in the whole workbook. And so I use this a lot when I have like percentages and rates and currency where I'm going to want them formatted and have consistency throughout the workbook. And then lastly, I want to talk about when you format a pill on your specific worksheet. So here I have profit ratio by state, and it is sorted in descending order. But because I made that workbook level formatting choice of bringing the font up, you can't really see these titles, right? They're too big. Some of them are getting lost. So I would probably go up to my state on columns and right-click it and format it. Again, you're going to get a side panel for your formatting. And let's go ahead and bump that font down. We'll take it down to 9, and I'll just make it purple again so it's obvious. So great, now I've got this small purple text, but I still think that's kind of long. I think it would probably be better if I used a state abbreviation. And lo and behold, I have one over here in my data pane. So Tableau is all about drag and drop. So when I started using Tableau, I would drag and drop everything. So I can drag this abbreviation on top of my state on columns, and it blows up my chart. All the formatting I did on my header is gone, and my sort is gone. So I'd have to redo all of those choices. So there's a better way. So I'm going to hit Control-Z to undo that. Instead of dragging and dropping, I'm going to double-click into state and then just start typing state so I can get my abbreviated value. And then instead of dragging and dropping, I'm just going to click that and hit enter, and then you can see all of that stuff was retained. So if you type on top of a pill when it's on columns and headers, when it's on color, even sometimes when it's on shape, you can retain all of the formatting you did for that pill and save yourself a lot of time. So hopefully you're all going to build dashboards like lickety-split now. So that's all the formatting I want to talk about. Let's now talk about how we're navigating within this workspace. So I've already kind of been navigating around, but let's take a closer look. So Tableau defaults to putting all of your sheets down here as tabs. You can tab through those quickly just using the Control tab, and it will cycle through all of your sheets. You can also change this to a little film strip if you wanted to see thumbnails. Over here, you've got these 3 little icons. So you might want to see a little picture of your sheet before you go there. You can also click what I like to call the waffle, and then see a view like this. You can see all your sheets laid out. You can reorganize them here just by dragging and dropping them. Or you could just double-click on one and immediately go to that sheet. You can also, a lot of times I forget where I used a dashboard or a sheet. You can right-click on a sheet and click on this Used In and say, oh, this is the dashboard I used it in, and jump immediately there. If you want to go back, there's also this little Go to Sheet button, and that will take you back to the worksheet. So if you want to quickly go back and forth between those two. Now, you may be noticing, too, that there's a lot of color coding going on, right? All of my tabs are color-coded, and the reason for that is twofold. One, I'm a freak about organization, so typically what I will do is I'll create a dashboard, and maybe I'll color that tab green. All the sheets that I then put onto that dashboard, I will also color code green. So it's really obvious to me which sheets go on which dashboard. But the other reason I like to color code is for filtering. So let's say I've got here this state filter on this sheet, and I want to apply it to all of those green sheets. If I right-click on State and Apply to Worksheet, I can go to Selected Worksheets, and Tableau says, maybe. Tableau says nothing. There it is. It says, oh, look, these are here, all your green sheets. You can see the color here on the left-hand side, and you can quickly just click through your green sheets without having to look and see, well, wait, which sheets did I actually want to apply this to? So that color coding is just a really good way to kind of trigger your brain and apply it. And then you'll see that it is now applied to all of these color-coded green sheets. It's up here on Filter. Now let's say later on I want to take that filter off, right? My end user doesn't need it, or I don't have a use for it anymore. I could go back to that same interface. I could right-click, Apply to Worksheets, and then uncheck all of those things. But that can be really time-consuming, especially when you've applied it to 10, 20 different sheets. So this is where I actually like to use Tableau's default behavior against itself. If you change this filter to a data source filter, it now applies to every sheet. But when you take a data source filter off of one sheet, it takes it off of all your sheets in your workbook. So now I can just pull this off, and it's gone from all the sheets. And I didn't have to do any extra clicking, right? It was just basically one and then drag and drop off. OK, let's go ahead and put the state filter back on and talk about this filter interface. So I'm going to check None to unselect these. Let's say I have a group of states that I want to select. Right? I want Alabama to Connecticut. So I'm going to hit Shift and select all of those. Now I'm just going to hit my space bar, and it's going to automatically check all of these. I cannot tell you how many times I do this. I don't know if it's like laziness. I can't get my cursor right into a checkbox. But you can just click on any part of the text and then hit your space bar to check and uncheck anything you have selected. And that's true pretty much anywhere you have checkboxes in Tableau. You can use that space bar to check and uncheck something. You can also copy-paste values from Excel into a filter, which I do all of the time. I constantly have lists in Excel that I need to bring into Tableau. So I will often just grab this list of states, Control-C to copy it, go back to Tableau, and instead of using this Select from List, you can go to Custom Value List, and then Control-V to paste it, and then all of those values are there super quickly. So that's a really easy way to bring in values to a filter. OK, let's talk about the data pane and how we work with dimensions and measures now. So over here on the left-hand side, I want to draw your attention to this little filter icon. You can filter by several different things just by clicking on this, but my go-to is this calculation, because that's going to filter to all of your calculated fields. So you can see all of them right there at one time, and it's really easy to go, oh, I can edit this field. So that's a super handy one. You can also use this search functionality, right? You could click into it, or if you're anywhere on your workbook, you can hit just Control-F, and that will jump your cursor into there, and you can start typing. So in this case, I want to bring category and subcategory onto this view, so I'll just start typing cat, and there they are. Now, you could drag and drop these individually, but if you have a lot of pills you want to bring onto a view, you can just hit Control and select multiple pills and drag them all on at the same time. You can also just double-click a pill or a field, and it will bring it onto your view as well. So both of those are going to be a little faster than dragging and dropping each thing individually. So let's say I want to turn this into a heat map. I want average sales by month. Well, I'm going to need order date for a month, and I'm going to need sales for sales. And if I just drag order date with what I'm going to call a left click and drag, just a normal click and drag, Tableau will do a default date part of a discrete year. But I don't want that. I want a month. So I would have to go into this pill, right-click it, and then select the date part. The faster way is if you right-click on order date and drag it to columns, Tableau will give you this pop-up and says, oh, you must not want my default. What do you want here? What date part? And you can select both discrete and continuous date parts. In this case, I want a month, so I'll just double-click on it, and there you have it. I didn't have to do any extra steps after I dropped it on. Same thing with sales. The default aggregation in Tableau is sum, but if you right-click and drag this onto your view, sales, it will give you another pop-up and says, oh, you must not want sum, and here I can just double-click average and bring in my average sales. So that's really helpful for especially dates and measures to do that to the right click and drag. Now I wanted to make this into a heat map, so I'm going to change my mark type to a square. And I want to leave average sales on label, but I also want it to be the color of this heat map. So I can quickly duplicate this pill just by hitting Control and then dragging it onto color, and now I have two versions. And you can do that everywhere, right? You can do it in rows and columns. If I just wanted to duplicate subcategory, I could Control click it and drag it. I could Control drag it into filters, right? You could Control and drag and get duplicate pills all over the place. Now let's say, lastly, I want to add some subtotals to this. I could go through the analysis dropdown, but that's a lot of clicks. It's much faster to use the analytics pane. You'll see there's this option for totals. As soon as I start to drag this over, Tableau has this pop-up and says, oh, where do you want totals? Subtotals, column, row, and you just drop it wherever you want it. And you could even, it's super quick. You could just add all three, boom, 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 in seconds. So it's much faster than having to navigate through that analysis dropdown. So this heat map has some default color apply, but I want to jazz it up with some custom color. So let's start talking about how we select and apply color in Tableau, because there are multiple ways. My favorite way, when I have a color palette that I'm using over and over, especially like a work color palette, is to create a custom color palette that I bring into my Tableau repository. And that might sound super scary, but I'm going to hopefully make it a little bit more accessible. So, oh, I didn't have it open. If you navigate to your Tableau repository, it's usually in Documents and my Tableau repository, there is going to be a Preferences file. If you right-click it, you can open it with a notepad, and you're going to get something that looks like this. This is a little bit scary, right? This is a lot of code, and when I first started using Tableau, I was super overwhelmed by this. I didn't want to touch it. I thought I would break it. But then I found this amazing resource that through SQL Bell. She is someone who has amazing YouTube videos and shares a lot of tips on Twitter, so if you're not following her, definitely give her a follow. But this is a tool that Interworks created specifically to create that code for that preferences file. And so all you do is you throw a name on there, right? I've named this one Data 24. You add your color palette, your colors into the middle part here just by copy pasting your hex codes. And then this tool will actually generate 3 separate types of color palettes. So you'll have a regular, a sequential, and diverging for each color swatch that you put in there. And then the best part is it just spits out the code. And you can copy paste all of it in there if you want all of these color palettes, or if you just want to select 1 or 2, you can just grab whatever you want. So let's go back into Tableau and start using that. So now if I were to put something like region onto color, you can see I have my default Tableau color palette. And when I go in to edit my colors, Tableau has a lot of different default palettes that it gets loaded with, right? All the way to lightning watermelon. But now you see these Data 24 color palettes. Those are the ones that I brought in using that tool. So another tip is you can see I have these ordered as blue, orange, purple, and pink. That's the order that I put them into that tool, and it's the order they came in at the code. And that was intentional. That was because I want central to be blue, east to be orange, south purple, and west pink. If I have them in the order that I want to assign them, I can hit Assign Palette, and it will assign them in that order. If I wanted west to be blue, I would have put blue at the bottom, right? So using that Assign Palette in colors and shapes can be a really big time saver. I also have commitment issues. So I typically like to apply my color palettes using this apply button and see what they're going to look like before I exit this interface. That way, if I don't like them, I can continue to go in there. Maybe I want to try lightning watermelon. Maybe I want to try something else. And I can play around with that until I get it where I like it, and I don't have to constantly close and reopen this interface. Now, anytime you have a field on your color shelf, you get a handy color legend over here. But don't be fooled. This is much more powerful than just a legend telling you what each thing is color-coded as. You can actually sort using this, right? I can drag and drop central here and put it down below south, so you can use this as a sort. You could right-click here, and I could use it as a filter, right? I could exclude south here, and when I do that, it throws a filter over here into my filter pane. You can also edit your aliases here, right? So if I wanted to call this central region, I could do that, right, all from the filter, or all from the legend. So this is actually pretty powerful. If you leverage this, you're going to save yourself a lot of time. So this is all super handy when you have a field on color, but lots of times you don't, right? A lot of times you just have a single color chart, like in this case, and when you go to edit your colors here, you get a different interface. You have these Tableau default colors, right, and the colors that you've used most recently, which just happen to be these Data 24 colors. When I click on more, again, I don't have access to those color palettes. I just get a color picker, right, so you can click around and click and select a color. You can paste a hex code in here if you wanted to, if you had your hex codes. Or you can use my favorite tool for picking color in Tableau, which is this Pick Screen Color button. And the reason I like this is when you click on this, you get a little cursor. And anything you hover over is a color that you can pick. And this is super powerful because you can actually use this outside of Tableau. So I will often have my color palette open in a totally different program. And you're in your head, you're like, yeah. And then you can just click outside of Tableau and select that color. So in this case, I'm just going to grab this pink from my recently used colors. And that's great, right? You've picked this color with the screen picker, but you don't want to do that every single time you have this interface. So what you can do is you can actually drag this color over to your custom colors. And now, even when you close and reopen Tableau, that color will be there forever and always until you replace it. And so every time you're in this interface, now you'll have access to that pink. So I'm going to click OK. So one other trick I want to show you when you have just one color on a chart is something that I learned from Autumn Batani. She's another Tableau Visionary. And what she suggested in one of her videos was to put a dummy field onto color when you just have a single color chart. And what I mean by a dummy field is, let's grab this over here and edit it. It's literally just the word color typed out in quotation marks. It doesn't even have to say color. It could be blank. It could be whatever. It could be your name. It could be anything you want. It's a dummy field. If you put this on color on this chart, and this chart, then when you need to go in and edit this, right, maybe you're still playing with colors or your end user like, I hate that purple, you can go to colors, and you're back to using your color palettes again. So you have access to your color palettes because you now have a field on color. So you could pick it through your color palettes. You can also double click on this and then get access to those colors that I just showed you before. So let's say I want to change this to blue. I'm going to click OK. And because we have this field and Tableau applies colors to fields, it will change the color on this chart, and this chart. And I only had to do it in one place rather than having to do it on all three. So that can be a really big time saver. All right, so let's start talking about calculations. Let's say I wanted to put a field, Let's say I wanted to put a field onto color, right? I wanted to highlight my max sum of sales here in this chart. I'm going to need a calculated field. If you take one tip from this presentation, I hope it's this hotkey, because this hotkey has probably saved me hours. I don't have the data on it, but I think with how many calculated fields we write as analysts, it's so handy to have a hotkey to bring this field, this window up. Because there's multiple ways to access the calculated field window in Tableau, but if you hit Alt-A-C, it's going to bring that window up. I must use this like 50 to 100 times a day, so it's going to save you a ton of time. So the first thing I do with every calculation is I name it. I'm going to call this C.maxColor. You may have noticed as I've been going through this, I have some naming conventions. A lot of my fields have this C dot in front of them. That is to trigger to myself that I wrote this field. It's handy to be like, oh yeah, this is a Lisa original. I wrote this. It also groups all your calculated fields together in the data pane, so they're super accessible. So I would really suggest coming up with some kind of naming convention that makes sense to you. So I want to put this field on color. I want to say do sum of sales equal the max sum of sales. So I could type all that out, but who has time for that? I'm going to leverage Tableau's drag and drop ability, right? Sum of sales is actually already up here in columns. So I can just drag this right into my calculated field window, and I didn't have to type anything. So you can drag from columns, you can drag from rows, you can drag from your data pane, you can bring in fields from anywhere, just dragging and dropping into this interface. So I want to say, does this sum of sales equal my window max sum of sales? So window max is just the maximum sales in this window. So when I start typing window, Tableau has this handy auto completion, and I'm going to go down and select window max. Again, I could type sum of sales, but why would I do that when I can just drag and drop it in? So this is a pretty straightforward and simple calculation. None of my calculations at work look like this. They're like nested if statements and nested LODs, and they're crazy. And then I start putting them on my view, and they're not working. I'm like, that's weird. So you often have to go in and troubleshoot. So what I like to do when I troubleshoot is look at certain sections of my calculated fields. And you can do that by highlighting a portion of your calculation and dragging it onto label. It's going to throw the output of that calculation onto the label on all of these bars. So I can quickly say, oh, OK, Tableau thinks the window max is 335,000. If I hover over chairs, I can see that that matches. I'm like, OK, cool. That's what it should be. So you can do that with different portions of your calculated fields and quickly find errors. Well, hopefully quickly. Now, like I said earlier, I have commitment issues. I like to, just like colors, I like to apply my calculations before I exit this window. Because when I hit apply, Tableau very handily creates this calculated field, but I still have that window open. So I can actually use this. I can use this field while I'm still editing it. So let's put it on color. It's doing what I think it should be doing. But if it wasn't, I could continue to edit this, right? And I could maybe I say it's not equal to window max. And I can hit apply again, and I could see the output of that. So applying your calculations before you actually close this window is going to be a big time saver as well. Now, sometimes you don't even actually need to open a calculated field window to create a calculation. If you have a really simple level of detail expression, or LOD, you can do it all without opening your calculated field window. So let's say I want to fix sales to subcategory. I'm going to click sales, hold control. Oops, not trying to edit you. I'm going to hold control, and I'm going to drag sales on top of subcategory. And Tableau just automatically created this LOD. If I right-click into this and edit it, you can see I have a super simple LOD, and I never even had to open this window. Yay. So let's say but maybe when I do have this window open, I want to create multiple calculated fields in one window. And this is what I'm going to call the Lindsay Poulter trick. I would be remiss if I did a presentation called At the Speed of Iron Viz, and I did not share this tip. She was a contestant in 2018, and to my knowledge, she's the first person to do this trick based on the audible gasp that I just heard here, right, in the audience that year. And this involves writing multiple calculated fields within one calculated field window. So when you're in Iron Viz, you can write all your calculations before you get to the stage. So we all have these crazy notepads that look like this, and we have all of our calculated fields in here. So I'm going to copy this. I'm going to use that hotkey again, that Alt-AC, and I'm going to paste this in here. And what you're going to see is each one of these calculated fields has a commented out line, right? These two backslashes mean it's commented out. This is going to be the title of the calculated field that I have below it. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight both of those lines. I'm going to highlight the commented and the calc, and drag it into my data pane, and Tableau will create it. So if I do that again, thank you, Lindsay Poulter. So I do that again and again, you now see that there are 3 calculated fields that were created here, all within this one calculated field window. And I know we're not all in Iron Viz. We don't write out our calculations before we get to work. But when I typically use this on a day-to-day is when I have very similar calculated fields, right? I might write one of these out and then copy, paste it in the same window, and then just quickly change these to profit, right? So if you have 2 things that are very similar, that can be really handy. OK, let's now talk about parameters, specifically string parameters. When I first started in Tableau, I was writing out every single value for a string parameter. It's a time suck. I don't know why I did that. Well, I do. It's because I didn't know this. So if you right-click on a field, you can go down to Create Parameter, and Tableau will do all of the work for you. It will name your parameter, it will set the data type, and most importantly, it will pipe in every single value from that field. So if you need every value in a field, it's great. But what if you don't, right? Maybe you only want a parameter for your central region states. Well, just like with filters, you can copy paste lists out of Excel. So here I have all the central states. I'm going to copy them. We'll go back to Tableau. And you might think, I'm going to click in value and Control V. No. Click under display as. You're not even going to know your cursor's there. But if you click there and Control V, it will paste those values in as well. So that's another fast way. If you have a list outside of Tableau, you can bring it into a parameter as well. So we've done all this work with calculated fields, with parameters. We start building out our dashboards, and we get there and we say, oh no, California is not an island in the Pacific yet. I need to edit something, right? There's something wrong on my column shelf in this chart. And so, oh, the time just popped. I don't know how much time I actually have, so it's going crazy. OK, so you can edit your calculated field from this dashboard just by clicking on any sheet. It doesn't have to be this hex map. I could click over here, go up to Analysis, Edit Calculated Field, and then I have all of those calculations that are available in my workbook. So I can go into this hex columns, say, what's wrong with California? Oh, it's got a 0. It should be a 2, and click OK. And now it gets shifted back. So the less time you spend jumping back and forth between your sheets and your dashboard, the more time you're going to save. So let's now talk about creating a dashboard like this, right? I'm going to recreate portions of this to show you how I typically build out dashboards. And since I'm recreating this, I am going to use copy-paste, right? So as of 2021.4, Tableau introduced this feature where you could copy-paste dashboard objects. So over here, you'll see a list of objects. These are all copy-pastable. As long as they don't have a chart or like a filter menu or something in them, you can copy-paste them. So I'm going to copy-paste this title. I'm just going to click on it, go to this caret, and there's this copy dashboard item. And when I go to a new dashboard, I can just hit Control V, and it will paste it. Now, Tableau, when you copy-paste something, it automatically pastes it in floating. I'm not going to get into the two camps of tiled and floating. I'm kind of team hybrid. I like them both. But for the purposes of this, I'm going to do a tiled dashboard. And so if I want this to go quickly into tiled, I'm going to hit Shift, and it's going to force it into a tiled. Same thing if I'm in tiled and I want to float something, I can just hit Shift. It just temporarily shifts it into floating, or vice versa. And you can float on top of a tiled very quickly. So I'm going to start adding some charts, and I'm going to do them in a container. Who has had issues using containers? Yeah, like everybody. If your hand's not up, I don't want to call you a liar, but I've got questions for you. That's because containers are really persnickety, right? You can lose track of a container, and then everything's out the window. You're like, did my chart go in there? Where did it go? Like, what's happening? So I'm going to show you 2 tricks that I do to keep track of those containers. So I'm going to drag this horizontal container in. And the first thing I'm going to do is grab a blank and drop it in there. This is going to help keep my container expanded. But I still can't see it, right? It's all transparent. So I'm going to add some color to that blank as well, which is going to require me to go to the layout pane over here. My second favorite hotkey behind Alt-AC is a single letter, and it is the letter T. If I hit that, it's going to toggle between dashboard and layout. And this is another one that I'm using constantly because I'm always going back and forth between dashboard and layout. And as you just hit T, and it goes right back and forth. So like I said, I'm going to add some color to this blank. I'm also going to add a big, chunky border around my container, again, because I don't want to lose track of it. So I know the blank object is still selected because it's outlined in gray and has this gray tab. If I double-click on this, it's going to all turn blue. That's how you know your parent container is selected. So if you just double-click on a tab, it's going to select the parent container. So I'm just going to go and I'm going to add a big old border. And now you are not going to lose track of this container, even if you try. So before I start putting charts in here, I'm going to drag out a horizontal container. I'm going to float it by hitting Shift. And I'm going to call this my garbage container. So I learned this trick from Sam Batchelor in last year's speed tipping, right? Because as soon as you start putting charts into a container, it brings in a lot of garbage, right? It might not be garbage. It might be stuff you need, but you may not want it on your chart on your dashboard right now. So it's all going to get bucketed up here in this floating container. And if you want to get rid of it, you just delete the container. So it's a quick way to just kind of get rid of all that junk. So OK, for the purposes of this demonstration, I'm done with this adding things to this container. So then I just take the blank out. And you see when I do that, my charts are kind of freeform, right? I can change the size of them. But I want them to be distributed evenly And I want them to distribute it evenly all the time, right? If this dashboard changes size, the container changes size, I want these to always be sized perfectly. So I'm going to double-click to select this container again and go over to this little caret and distribute contents evenly. When I do that, I can't do anything to these anymore, right? They are going to be sized perfectly all of the time. So this is a really good way to get like a nice perfect grid. So OK, I'm done with this container now. Let's go back. I'm going to hit T. I'm going to take the border off. Now I want to format these charts. This sounds really bizarre, but I like to format the charts from the bottom up on this pane. And that's because I can quickly, I can add my padding. I can go up and add a background, and then quickly click into border and add a border. If I go the other way on this sales by state, if I go from top down, I select my border, and then I can't jump into background. I have to click out of it and then jump to background. I have to click out of background and then jump to outer padding. I know this sounds kind of silly probably, but it saves a lot of time. These are all extra clicks that you can just get out of your life. All right, so let's jump back to this more complete dashboard to demonstrate the last bits. Let's say you take this to your boss, your end user, and you're showing it to them, and they're like, yeah, I love it. I'm not sold on this hex map. Like, let's just do a regular map. This is too fancy. So you build that map, and you might be tempted to just grab that sheet from your dashboard pane over here, drag it into your container, and delete the hex map. But when you do that, you lose all that formatting you just did, right? You're going to have to redo it on the sheet. You're going to have to add your padding, your background, your border. So again, there's a better way. Undo that. Click on the sheet that you want to swap out. And then over here on the left-hand side, you'll notice that any chart that I haven't used has this little icon to swap sheets. And when I click that, it will swap it out. It will retain all the formatting. So what I typically do at work is I'll create one sheet, one tab of my dashboard, and then I'll just duplicate it, and then change out the charts, right? Just quickly with these little swap sheet buttons. And so you basically have a little template created, and it's way faster than having to rebuild everything. Now again, we're in the kind of final stages of our dashboard. We are doing our final QA, and we get here and we see shipping status. I don't know where spell check was on that. So we want to go in and we want to edit our tooltip. You can do that, again, just like the calculated field, directly from your dashboard. So if you click on shipping status, go up to worksheet, there is an option for tooltip. And when you hit that, you get the tooltip interface right here on the dashboard without ever having to leave. So you can go in, you can add your eye to shipping, you can do anything else you want to do in this tooltip, and click OK. Now, one of my last things I want to talk about on the dashboard is this item hierarchy. So if I click here and I hit my asterisk key, it will open up all those containers really quickly, which, especially when we're in tiled, you kind of get a lot of nested containers aligned, right? It's really hard to keep track. So you can open them up quickly with the asterisk key, and you'll notice that all of these containers are named, right? Top charts, bottom charts, charts. You can do that by right-clicking here and renaming your dashboard item. You could also do it when you're out here and you have your container selected, and you can rename it here as well. When you do that, it will bring up a pop-up to just name whatever you want. This is super helpful in tiled, but it's essential when you're floating, right? Because it's so easy to lose track of those containers. When you have them named over here on the left-hand side, it's much easier to stay organized and find those containers quickly and do whatever you need to do to them. And you may notice that a lot of the things I'm talking about today are kind of under the umbrella of this soft skill of organization, right? Color coding tabs, naming your calculated fields, naming your containers. The more organized you stay in general in Tableau, the faster you're going to go, right? The less hunting you're going to have to do for things, and the faster you're going to be able to build dashboards and analyze data. So those are all of my tips. I just want to thank you all for being here. Oops, we're on the wrong slide. I want to thank you for being here. I hope you feel confident enough to now go back and take a lot of these things into your workflow. A lot of what I've talked about is muscle memory, right? So if you start using 1 or 2 of these a week and slowly build them in, they'll just start to become second nature after a long time. So I would highly advise you all to do that so you can start going at the speed of Iron Viz in your own life. Please take the survey. I read your comments and I take them to heart and try to get better. So please answer them honestly and openly. You can read the session AI-generated session summary in the app. And I just want to say thank you. I know we have like 1 minute, but thank you.